And now, Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Are you interested in eating healthier, perhaps a vegan lifestyle? Because I know lately I've been going down that road. Then please welcome Eddie Garza. Eddie is a chef. He's an author. In fact, he's written two books. This latest one, the 30-day vegan meal plan for beginners. And also you're on the show Global Bites, right? On Oz TV. Welcome, Eddie. How you doing?
Thank you so much, Deborah. I am so excited to be here with you, especially because we're going to be talking about my favorite subject, vegan food or food in general. It's my favorite topic and it's what keeps me happy.
By the way, I love your kitchen. We were setting up the shot and I said, "Oh my gosh, I want to come over and I want to have a meal in your kitchen because it's so inviting and I can imagine you're really just cooking up a storm in there all the time." I want to talk to you a little bit about growing up in Southern Texas. Your family is from Mexico and you decided to live a healthier lifestyle with your food because you were a little larger, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in the South Texas border town of Brownsville, and that is a place that has everything that you can find in the United States food wise, but also everything that you can find in Mexico food wise. So imagine being in a place where you have access to all the most unhealthiest foods in the world, all in one small town. So I was a victim of that food system, just the way a lot of my other peers were. So I grew up to be an obese kid that grew up to be an obese adult. And it was really at my early 20s when I started making a change to improve my health. Thankfully, I had some help from
Oh
another.
my gosh. Look at that photo. Okay, I'm beside myself. That is incredible. How large were you there, Eddie? And that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
How
at that point, I was at my peak. I was at 310 pounds and I'm 5'7", so I'm a pretty short guy. Now, the biggest problem with that weight wasn't necessarily just the vanity issues. It was really a lot of health issues that I was also struggling with, including I was pre-diabetic. I was constantly injured because I couldn't support my own weight. So I had
no.
one ankle that was sprained and then it healed. The other one was sprained. It was always just like a constant revolving it was just a comedy of errors, if you will. But thankfully, I made this change, and during that process, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was a 5-year process from starting to eat healthier to eating like a completely plant-based diet, and then that led into all sorts of other discoveries that really benefit the planet, benefit animals, and it just kind of became this overall lifestyle change. And when people ask me about like how were things when you were growing up versus now, I have to think about two different beginnings: the beginning of my life versus the beginning of my new life. And the new life is the one that is vibrant. I do things that I never would have imagined having done. Like I'm a kayaker. I kayak every single day, and I love to swim, and I love to do these things that I physically could not do at my heavy weight.
I want to talk a little bit about that heavy weight because um, what got you there? Obviously eating, but I mean, were you addicted to the type of foods? What ingredients were in those foods, in your opinion, that sort of kept you coming back and eating? Because obviously that's overeating. What was going on there mentally that caused that to happen?
That's a great question. And that's something that I have now become comfortable in my older age to talk about. I had
Yeah.
battling depression. A lot of it was depression about my sexuality and not being able to handle that with the area that I grew up in, and suppressing my feelings through food. That was really one of the biggest problems. And then when you're in a pattern that's just so unhealthy, it's almost more difficult to tackle the problem than to just continue doing it. And, it was just a bad pattern. And it really
Hmm.
took a big bump. So somebody actually said to me, like, you need to lose weight. And it was in a little bit heavier, maybe harsher terms, but it was the beating that I needed mentally to just get me to just like change. And overnight, I at least made that decision to tomorrow we are going to start eating healthier, even if it's just one meal out of the day. And that's the reason it was really a 5-year process for me, because I'm not one person who can just decide to do something and then quit something cold turkey. I need to have steps in place and make small changes little by little. It was a 5-year learning process, but that's the reason that I wrote my last book, because a lot of people have the same questions. How can I start? Well, I wanted to write a guide for people who were just like me back in the day that wanted to make the start, but didn't even know where to start. So this book not only has 100 delicious recipes from eggs Benedict to a delicious cheesecake, which you've got to try, but it also has a complete guide to like what you're going to need for your first week of shopping, how you're going to prep all your food, and then 30 full days plus lots of other recipes to continue, because most of the people who are going to try this are going to want to continue on beyond 30 days.
Tell us the difference between vegan versus vegetarian. A lot of people are confused by it, and that would go for me too, please.
Well, the vegetarian diet is essentially the vegan diet. That was the original vegetarian diet. And the reason that people consider vegetarian and vegan a little bit different nowadays is because some vegetarians eat eggs and some eat dairy. Now, those have added terms. So if you're an ovo-vegetarian, that means that you're a vegetarian that eats eggs. If you're a lacto-vegetarian, that means that you're a vegetarian that eats dairy. Now, if you're an ovo-lacto, you eat both. But if you're just a vegetarian that doesn't consume eggs or dairy, that's essentially a vegan diet. So really, there's not that much of a difference. It kind of changed a little bit over time.
What about pescatarian?
Now, pescatarian are people who eat largely plant-based, but also eat fish and other sea animals. So pescatarian and vegetarian are completely different. One eats animals and one doesn't.
Now, did you do this primarily because of health? And by that, I mean, turn to a vegan diet, and or also because of the planet, right? And how we can help in that area, as well as the way we treat animals. Can we address that, please? The planet and the way we treat our animals.
I originally started this diet and this lifestyle as a way to improve my health. And it was during that time,
right.
I mean, there's a saying that RuPaul always says that you can't, well, how can you love anybody else if you don't love yourself, right? And that was the thing. I don't think that I had reached that place of loving myself until I got healthier, and then I was able to expand my empathy to others. So it was really when I started making these changes and I felt better about myself, I was no longer struggling with depression, but I was able to open my mind to how I can be empathetic to all other creatures and of course the planet. So really, that was sort of like a second part of my journey, is learning all the things that I was doing to benefit the planet and benefit the animals. And one of the things that I saw was a video of the way that animals in particularly chickens that we use for food, they're called broiler chicken. Yeah. The way that they're bred so large, so fast that they struggle with crippling leg conditions. So that's one of the animals that I always identify with. When I see images of these animals, I think about those times that I used to sprain my ankles. Now, that was something that I did to myself, but the way that we breed those animals to sprain their ankles and to have these crippling leg conditions is something that these animals don't have a choice. So for me, that was one of the things that I thought, we're no different. I know these animals are struggling. I know that crippling leg condition does not feel good. It didn't feel good to me, and certainly doesn't feel good to them. So really, it was like my health transformation transformed my mind, my heart, kind of everything.
But also in terms of animal behavior, right? Cows and pigs and chickens, right? I mean, their social behaviors a little bit. If we could talk a little bit about that, because the way they're treated is shocking. I recently saw a video of the way little piglets were being treated in a mass situation, in a pork place, and it made me sick. I mean, it's one thing to treat them so badly, and then it's another thing to torture them. I mean, it was just awful. Can we go into that a little bit?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way the animals are treated on factory farms is abusive, and it's not something that is uncommon. In fact, there are standard practices in the way that animals are raised in factory farms that it becomes a standard throughout the industry all over the world. So these abuses happen regularly, and that's one of the reasons that one of the campaigns that I support is the Meatless Monday. I recently joined as an ambassador, a culinary ambassador for the Meatless Monday campaign. And what they do is they try to just reduce the amount of meat that people are eating so that we can reduce the pressure off of factory farms to produce so many animals for food. Because I think that if we're wanting to be more compassionate, even one day out of the week, you are doing something for these billions, and I say billions with a B, of animals that are on these factory farms worldwide.
Now, a lot of people are saying, hey, wait a minute, I need my meat. At the very least, I've got to have a little bit of chicken. I've got to have that meat protein. How do you substitute it in the same way?
You know, that's something that just came up in a conversation when somebody asked me, how do you get your protein? I said, how don't you get your protein? Everything has protein. In fact, some of the best protein sources are plant-based proteins. In fact, if you were just a regular American, average 150 pounds, say, that needs to eat some sort of protein, one serving of tempeh, which is a really popular food, and it's going to be one of the trending foods that we're going to see in 2022, has so much protein. One serving gives you all you need for an average 150-pound person. Now, another thing,
Wow.
yeah, and it's incredible. It makes a delicious bacon, I gotta say. So tempeh is one of those foods that I really love to eat because it is high in protein. And also chickpeas. Chickpeas are the best. When you talk to a lot of vegan bodybuilders and athletes, that's the one food that they say they always have. You know, I've got this air fryer in the back. I don't know if you can see it, but this air fryer is perfect because you can put just a can of chickpeas and you toast it up and you've got a perfect snack. And it's that one little baggie of snacks is going to give you all the protein you need in an entire day.
And does it keep you full? Again, I had somebody say, yeah, but I have to have my cheeseburger. And I'm like, really? Does it keep you as full as a cheeseburger would, or, chicken legs or something?
Well, I will say this, it's not going to keep you as full as a cheeseburger because the cheeseburger is going to take a lot of time for your body to process because there is a lot of fat. There is just very dense calories in a cheeseburger. Whereas if you eat a can of chickpeas, we're talking about a fraction of the calories. So you're going to probably eat more chickpeas than for the cheeseburger, but you're not going to feel that same heartburn, indigestion that you would feel after eating a cheeseburger. Now, I will say there are other alternatives to, burgers. There are so many different plant-based burgers on the market now. From Beyond Meat to Impossible to a new company called Omnipork that's just here from, I think it's from Asia. And that stuff is incredible. It's a one-to-one replacement for meat. It's got the same flavor, same texture, but zero cholesterol, and it's going to be a lot better for you.
It's fantastic. I've tried it. But, there's a lot of options because you've got this giant book about how to do it. And like you were talking about also the cheesecake, there's a lot we can make, people, without by being plant-based. I love that there's so many great and by the way, you made them simple for somebody like me, so I sincerely appreciate that, because when I look at a cookbook, sometimes I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's just very simple, right? For someone who's busy, for someone who wants to understand about the vegan lifestyle and do it, as opposed to staring at it and going, I'll never be able to do it. So that's great. Let's talk about your first book a little bit, because it has a lot of influences from your grandmother. In fact, you dedicated it to your grandma, right? I love that. So talk about their life in Mexico and some of the influences that you had in the early years, which I know are very positive.
When I was a toddler, I was not an outdoorsy kid. I loved hanging out with my grandmother and watching telenovelas with her. I just loved her so much. Sadly, I lost her last year, and it was a big heartbreaking moment. But every time I'm in the kitchen, I think back to those wonderful days of cooking with her. From the age of 4, I was cooking with her. And I love this book because it is exactly what I ate when I was growing up, but done in a plant-based way. So all of these recipes are things that just kind of take me back to those wonderful days of spending time with my grandmother and learning from her. She's from a town called Guanajuato, Mexico, and that's in central Mexico. That's a very beautiful town. It's arguably the most beautiful town in Mexico. And all of the recipes that you'll find in this book are a dedication to her, because she started eating healthier toward her later years. And one of the things that we did together, it was so beautiful. Like, there were so many of those recipes that I wanted to add that were her flavor. And when I was growing up, she used to say just a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. And this book was really me and her working together to talk about, like, well, how much exactly? How much is a little bit more? Are we talking about 1/8 of a teaspoon, a 1/4 teaspoon? And together we figured all that out. So that book was it's a complete homage to my grandmother, who I love, and I still think about her every day. And, this month, especially during Latinx Heritage Month, I make so many of these meals and try to add spices that she would add. Even if they're not things that I typically use in my kitchen, I add them because it's that time to just remember her. This is also her birthday month, so it's especially it's very special to me.
I love that. It's beautiful. Now, you also work with marginalized communities. If you could explain what you do when you go into certain communities and talk about health and nutrition. And I have a question, right? Because you were a guy who was quite overweight. How can we get people away from the packaged stuff? Like, I don't want to necessarily mention a brand, right? But those chips and those processed things that, you go to big box stores and people are driving out in their big carts with lots of stuff that's just awful for your body. How can we get away from that, please?
I think the biggest thing that I've been seeing with getting people away from that is showing them a better way, showing them alternatives. And one of the things that I do that is the most important work that I do is working in communities where healthy food is either a mystery or simply not that easy to find in the grocery store. So we're talking about areas that are largely high Hispanic populations. In every major city, you're going to have kind of an inner city area that has an underserved community of people who just are either in food deserts or they go to school and that's their one meal a day. So the way that I approached this was I started working with some school districts interestingly, in my in my town where I grew up. And in that entire area, it's one of the most unhealthy areas of the United States. So I work directly with school districts, school lunch programs to get them to add healthier food options for the kids. So we developed different types of programs to get them to encourage the kids to eat the healthier options and also start adding days where everything that they get to choose from is only a healthy option. So that worked to other work in Florida, other work in Chicago, here in California, did some work in New York. And I noticed that all of these communities have the same struggles. And it's access to healthy food and also just not having those healthy options at the schools. So what's the way to tackle it? Go directly to the source, the people who are feeding them, and teach them how to make these foods healthier. And that work actually even flowed into Mexico after I started doing that work here in the US. I started doing work in Mexico and I got to work with one of the largest food companies to train all of their staff on how to make healthier replacements for certain things like different types of sauces, different types of broths, and using things that they would normally throw away and turn that into food. So we're tackling food waste, we're tackling healthy food options, and of course, giving those people who are working in these places training that they did not receive in culinary school. So it's a win-win for everybody.
But also the people consuming it. It's very easy to pick up a bag of chips. It's easy, right? It's just easy. You run out the door with it. But to help people make a healthier choice that also is of similar price points too, because I know that, packaged foods sometimes can be a little cheaper, but we need those options for people too, right? So they'll pick the healthier choice as opposed to what's easy and cheap, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's still a lot of work to be done in that space.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, so, it's going to be a constant battle, but I'm willing to fight it.
Yeah, I remember once being in a big box store and I had with me blueberries and strawberries and all that, and it was fairly cheap. And the person behind me had like the giant, processed food stuff. And mine, I actually took notice of this, was way cheaper. And I thought, gosh, if I could just turn around and talk to this person and say, by the way, this choice is not only really good, but it's a lot cheaper than that stuff you're buying. We have to teach them about that too, that believe it or not, some of the healthier options can sometimes be even cheaper. We have to sort of get that in people's heads as opposed to letting the advertising get into people's heads. You've cooked for Daisy Fuentes and Cybill Shepherd and all sorts of celebrities. Tell us a little bit briefly also about your show and what you do on your show.
Yeah, so I'm blessed to be able to have a group of really cool people in my life who I've gotten to cook for. And I don't know what else to say other than what I love about cooking for some of these folks is that they love food as much as I do. They love to explore flavors, they love to talk flavors. And gosh, that was one of the reasons that I invited Daisy to be on that show with me on Dr. Oz's OzTube. She and I did a Cuban ropa vieja, which is a very traditional dish in Cuba. And she's originally from Cuba. So we ended up making this dish together and we always have so much fun in the kitchen. But the show Global Bites is awesome because it was inspired by my second cookbook. It's globally inspired recipes, easy to find ingredients, and also just to showcase the diversity of vegan food that there is all over. So the show actually has a lot of vegan replacements, but then it also highlights things that are naturally vegan or vegetarian. Like I have a chana masala that is one of the most iconic vegetarian dishes in the world. I love it. It was one of the first vegetarian dishes that I had ever had. And
Love it.
so, yeah, it's so great. And then there are other things that I do that are, they can be naturally vegetarian, like my paella. I love food. I spent so many years studying in Spain, and every summer I would go out there and just try to learn more about the gastronomy in Spain. And paella is a mainstay. So I definitely have that as well. But you got to check out the Cuban ropa vieja, because that we use jackfruit. And jackfruit, a lot of people know how to treat it, but it is fantastic. And it absorbs all the flavors that you're looking for, and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. In fact, yeah, it's just really wonderful.
Might you open a restaurant here in Los Angeles? Because I sure would go. I mean, I actually love the taste. I prefer the taste of vegan food. I'm not a big meat person, even from when I was a little kid. So I always try and find options, and I'm trying to find restaurant options too. Is that in your future, perhaps?
We're going to see. COVID changed a lot of my plans for for what the future holds. But for now, I'm still doing my consulting work, and that's been very exciting. I was about to say, like, one of the things that I really loved about the jackfruit story is that I have, if you want to try my food, I have a menu at a hotel in Guanajuato. It's at the Casa Rector. That is an incredible boutique hotel that has the most amazing views of the city. And at that hotel, you can find my recipes at the breakfast cafe, at the fine dine in the second floor, and also even up at the bar. And one of the things that we have there is a very traditional taco called the tacos al pastor. And I use jackfruit. And it literally absorbs all the flavors. You wouldn't think anything of it, except it's just delicious Mexican food. So that hotel also has several different breakfast sandwiches that I developed. It's got a really yummy ceviche that uses shiitake mushrooms instead of fish. And you're going to be in for a treat if you check this place out.
Oh, I'm so excited that you told us about that, because I know that that's been something very important to you and close to your heart, to be able to actually have a restaurant there. But here you are, you've got your recipes that are being served there. So that's really pretty spectacular. So what's next for you before I let you go?
Well, what's next for me is a lot of really cool stuff that I'm excited to share. I recently took the position of food editor for Veg News Magazine, which is the premier vegan lifestyle magazine in the world. And prior to that, I had always dreamed of being featured in Veg News Magazine. I became a regular contributor. And when they tapped me to be their new food editor, I could not turn it down. So I'm super excited because in January, my first issue is going to be out, and it features some delicious food from amazing chefs from all over the world. And that's something that I really want to add to that magazine, is to bring in more voices. There are so many incredible chefs all over the world that are doing some really spectacular things with vegetables that you wouldn't even believe that they're actually vegetables after the way they've told you how to prepare them. So the first issue that's going to be out in January that I've edited is, wow, you are in for a treat.
Oh, I love this, because I'm going to make sure I pick that up. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Eddie Garza, for joining us. Please pick up his book, The 30-Day Vegan Meal Plan for Beginners, packed with everything from desserts to appetizers to sandwiches. I mean, you just name it. I love this. And what did I say before we went on the air? I love your smile, Eddie. You're just,
thank you
and also a shout out to your husband, because I know that you work with him as well. So I wanted to also give a shout out to him. So thanks you. And everybody, you could find our show, of course, on YouTube and Facebook, and then IGTV and all audio platforms. You will find us, Deborah Kobylt Live. Please pick up his cookbook and check out his show on OzTV. So thanks, Eddie, for joining us. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Deborah.
It's been wonderful. And everybody, we'll see you soon on Deborah Kobylt Live. Take care. Bye-bye.